When the pale light of the studio spots hit the stage, Sarah Jenkins looked less like a contestant and more like a ghost. The 22-year-old gripped her guitar with knuckles bleached white, her eyes fixed on a point just above the judge's table, as if she was looking at someone only she could see. The audience, accustomed to flashy costumes and confident struts, fell into a confused hush. This wasn't the body language of ambition, this was the posture of a soldier walking into gunfire. And the man she had come to face, the famously acerbic music mogul Julian Frost, was already leaning forward, his finger hovering over the red buzzer, ready to cut her off before she could even begin. The audition for the network's biggest talent show, Star Quest, was being held in a converted opera house in downtown Chicago. The air inside was thick with the scent of hairspray, nervous sweat, and the ozone crackle of high-voltage lighting. Julian Frost sat in the center of the judges' panel, a monument to industry power in a tailored black suit. To his left, pop diva Kiki Valentine fanned herself with a stack of forms, and to his right, veteran producer Marcus Webb nursed a cup of cold coffee, his expression unreadable. Sarah Jenkins walked to the center of the vast stage. She was dwarfed by the space. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain white blouse and faded jeans. She looked like she had wandered in off the street by mistake. Name. Julian's voice cut through the silence like a blade. No warmth, no preamble. Sarah. Her voice was barely a whisper. Sarah Jenkins. And what are you going to sing for us today, Sarah? Marcus Webb asked, his tone softer than Julian's, but just as tired. Sarah looked down at her guitar, then back up at that empty space above their heads. I'm going to sing a song I wrote, she said. It's called, The Man on the Bridge. Across the table, Julian Frost went completely still. It was a subtle thing, a cessation of movement so total it was almost imperceptible. But Marcus Webb, who had known Julian for 20 years, saw it. He saw the slight widening of Julian's eyes, the momentary loss of his cynical smirk. Kiki Valentine, oblivious, just shrugged and gestured for Sarah to begin. Sarah took a deep breath, her shoulders trembling. She strummed the first chord, a soft, melancholic minor key that seemed to suck the warmth out of the room. The song started quietly, a simple melody about walking home on a rainy Chicago night. She sang about the slick streets reflecting the neon lights, the tired feeling in your bones after a long day. Then the lyrics shifted. She sang about stopping on a bridge over the river, looking out at the churning water below. She saw a man there, standing alone, leaning against the railing. Her voice, clear and pure, filled the hall. She sang of not knowing the man, of only seeing his silhouette, a dark shape against the city lights. She sang about the feeling that passed between two strangers in the dead of night, a shared sense of something heavy, something unspoken. She'd passed him by, she sang, too lost in her own small world to say a word. The next morning, she heard the news. A man had jumped from that bridge. And in her grief for a stranger, she realized the weight he must have been carrying, the silent scream no one heard. The song built to a powerful, aching chorus. It wasn't just about loss, it was about the moments we fail to connect, the hand we don't reach out, the silent tragedies that unfold every day around us. It was a song of profound, heartbreaking regret. As the final chord faded, a tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. The silence in the opera house was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant wail of a siren from the street below. Kiki Valentine was openly crying. Marcus Webb just stared, his coffee forgotten. But all eyes were on Julian Frost. He sat motionless, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. His face, usually a mask of cynical judgment, was pale. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Finally, he leaned into his microphone. His voice, when it came, was hoarse, stripped of its usual authority. Where did you hear that story?" he asked. Sarah met his gaze for the first time. "I didn't hear it anywhere," she said softly. "I lived it. That was my dad." A ripple of confused murmurs went through the audience. The story was about a man jumping from a bridge. But Julian Frost knew something they didn't. He knew that 8 years ago, his best friend, his mentor, the man who had given him his first job in the music business, a man named Arthur Jenkins, had died. The official report said it was a car accident, a tragic skid off a rainy road. But Julian had always known the truth. Arthur had been battling depression for years, a battle he hid from everyone, including Julian. Julian had gotten a call from him that night, a call he was too busy to take. He had let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was just silence, then the sound of rain, and then, nothing. Julian had always believed Arthur drove his car off that road on purpose. He had blamed himself every single day since. "But your name is Jenkins," Julian whispered, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "Arthur Jenkins, he was. He was my father," Sarah said, her voice stronger now. "You knew him. You were his friend." Julian stood up from his chair, his hands braced on the judge's table. The audience gasped. They had never seen Julian Frost lose his composure. Ever. "Sarah," he said, his voice cracking. I tried to find you. After the funeral, your family, you just disappeared. We moved in with my grandmother in a small town in Missouri," she explained. "Mom couldn't stay in the city. Too many memories. She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." The tragedy of this young woman, standing alone on that vast stage, was now laid bare for everyone to see. She had lost her father to suicide and then her mother to illness. And she had written a song about the night her father died, a night she had only pieced together from news reports and her own grief-stricken imagination, never knowing the full story of the phone call he had made. Julian walked around the judge's table and took a few steps towards the stage. The security guards tensed, but the producer waved them down. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with an emotion no one had ever heard from him before. "That night, your father called me. Just before it happened. I didn't pick up. I was in a meeting. I was arrogant. I thought it could wait. I have lived with that guilt for 8 years. I thought I was the last person he tried to reach. I thought he died alone, thinking I had abandoned him." Tears were now streaming down Julian Frost's face, the man famous for crushing dreams with a single word, now utterly shattered by a simple song. But Sarah shook her head. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "He didn't call you to say goodbye, Mr. Frost." Julian froze. "What? My father," she said, taking a step closer to the edge of the stage, "kept a journal. He wrote in it every single night. After my mom died, I found it. He wrote about that night. He wrote about the rain, about the weight he was feeling. He wrote about how he got in the car, not knowing where he was going. And then he wrote about calling you." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "He said he called you because you were the only person in the world who could always make him laugh. He said he just wanted to hear your voice, to feel normal for 1 minute. He said you didn't answer, but he heard your voicemail message. He listened to your voice, telling callers to leave a message, and he said," he smiled. "He wrote that just hearing your voice on that recording reminded him that there was still goodness in the world, still friendship. He said he turned the car around. He was coming home, Mr. Frost. He was coming home because of you." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Julian staggered back a step, as if he had been pushed. The story everyone believed, the story he had believed for 8 years, was wrong. He hadn't failed his friend. His voice, even a recorded message, had been a lifeline. "Then how?" Julian asked, his voice a broken whisper. "The bridge. The man in your song. The man on the bridge was a different night," Sarah explained, her own tears flowing freely now. "A week later. My father, he was trying so hard. He was going to therapy. He was talking to my mom. But the depression, it was a monster. He had a moment of weakness, a moment of despair. He went to that bridge. But he didn't jump. He stood there, fighting his own demons. And a girl walked past him. A girl my age, at the time. She was probably just a student, walking home. She didn't see his face. She didn't know his story. She just walked by. And my father, he told his journal that he saw her ordinary life, her ordinary troubles, and he felt a flicker of connection to the world. He stepped back from the railing. He went home. The man on the bridge survived that night. The man on the bridge came home. Then the car accident." Julian pressed, desperate to understand. A week after that, he was driving home from a support group meeting. It was raining. A truck lost control on the highway. It was a pure, random, senseless accident. Sarah's voice broke on the last word. There was nothing deliberate about it. He was fighting. He was winning. And it was taken away from him. From us. The audience was in pieces. People were sobbing openly. Kiki Valentine had her head in her hands. Marcus Webb was wiping his eyes with his sleeve. The entire narrative had been flipped. It wasn't a story of suicide and guilt. It was a story of a man's battle, a small moment of human connection on a bridge, and a tragic twist of fate. And at the center of it all was Sarah, armed only with her father's journal and her guitar, come to give Julian Frost the one thing he never thought he'd have: absolution. Julian walked up the side steps and onto the stage. He approached Sarah slowly, as if she were a deer that might spook. He stopped a few feet from her. He turned the car around, Julian repeated, his voice thick with wonder. Because of me. Because of your voice, Sarah corrected gently. Because you were his friend. Julian Frost, the man who had made and broken 1,000 careers, did something he had never done on live television. He opened his arms. Sarah hesitated for only a second before stepping into his embrace. They held each other, two people bound by love for the same man, their shared grief finally given a place to rest. The audience rose to their feet. It wasn't the usual, automatic standing ovation for a great performance. This was something else. It was a collective release, a standing tribute to the girl's bravery and the man's vulnerability. The applause went on for a full 3 minutes. When Julian finally pulled back, he kept his hands on her shoulders. He looked her in the eye. That song, he said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. That song isn't just a piece of music. It's a gift. It's the most important piece of art I have ever heard, because it gave me back my friend. He turned to the camera, his face still wet with tears, but his eyes blazing with a new, fierce determination. You're through to the next round, Sarah. But more than that, you have a record deal, right here, right now, with my label. Not because of who your father was, but because you are one of the most talented, courageous people I have ever met. The crowd erupted again. Sarah, overwhelmed, could only nod and mouth the words "thank you." But the story wasn't quite over. As the commotion died down and Sarah was about to walk off stage, the show's host, a bubbly personality named Chad Michaels, rushed over, a curious look on his face. Sarah, Julian, wait a moment, Chad said, holding up his hands. We've just had a fascinating development in the control room. Sarah, you mentioned your father kept a journal. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, I have it with me, actually. I brought it for courage. It's in my bag backstage. Well, Chad said, his voice filled with dramatic pause. We've had a call. A woman named Eleanor Vance is watching the show tonight from her home in Florida. She says she was a student at Northwestern University 8 years ago. She says she was walking home one rainy night and saw a man standing on the bridge over the Chicago River. She says she was going through a tough time herself, and she wanted to say something to him, to ask if he was okay, but she was too shy. She just walked on by. She says she has thought about that man every single day for 8 years, wondering what happened to him, if he was okay. She says she wants to know if that man was Arthur Jenkins. The air left the room again. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. The girl in the song, the one she had imagined, the one she had written about with such profound regret, was real. She was out there. She had been carrying the same guilt, the same unanswered question, for 8 years. Julian looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Julian. The random tragedy of Arthur's death had created two separate, parallel stories of guilt and grief, one in Julian Frost, and one in a stranger named Eleanor. And now, on this stage, through the power of a song, their stories had collided. Can we call her? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The producer's voice crackled in Chad's earpiece. A moment later, a large screen on the side of the stage flickered to life. An image appeared, a woman in her late 20s, with kind eyes and tears streaming down her face, sitting in a living room in Florida. Hello. Eleanor's voice came through the speakers, shaky and scared. Sarah walked towards the screen. Eleanor. My name is Sarah Jenkins. Arthur Jenkins was my father. Eleanor sobbed. I'm so sorry. I saw him standing there. I wanted to stop. I wanted to ask if he needed help. But I was just a kid, I was scared. I've never forgiven myself. I thought maybe if I had just said something. Sarah reached out a hand towards the screen. Eleanor, listen to me. He wrote about you. He wrote that a girl walked past him on the bridge that night. He said that seeing you, just a normal person going about her life, reminded him that the world was still turning. It gave him the strength to step back. You didn't fail him, Eleanor. You saved him. For one more week. You gave him a week. The three of them, Julian, Sarah, and the woman on the screen, were now connected by a single, tragic, beautiful thread. The song had done more than heal Julian, it had reached across the country and given peace to a stranger who had been haunted by a moment of inaction for nearly a decade. The show's producers were in a frenzy. This was television gold, but it was also something profoundly human. They kept the cameras rolling as Sarah, Julian, and Eleanor spoke for several more minutes, exchanging stories, sharing memories of a man none of them would ever forget. Julian promised to fly Eleanor to Chicago to meet Sarah in person. The segment, which was supposed to be a simple audition, had become a live, national therapy session. When the broadcast finally cut to a commercial, the studio was a mess of tears and embraces. Sarah Jenkins, the shy girl in the white blouse, had walked onto that stage carrying the weight of her father's death. She left it having lifted the weight from two other people's shoulders, forever changing the life of the most powerful man in music, and finding an unexpected sister in a stranger 1,000 miles away. It was a moment that proved that the most powerful songs aren't just melodies and lyrics. They are vessels for the truth, capable of crossing time and space to heal wounds we never even knew we had. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of the power of connection, please subscribe to this channel. We share stories of hope, healing, and the incredible moments that remind us of our shared humanity. And tell us in the comments below, from which part of the country are you watching this video tonight? We want to see how far this story reaches.